It's easy to hear feedback from investors and immediately jumping to making a bunch of changes based on that feedback. I think about these meetings with investors and they hear 10 to 20 minutes of my spiel, but they're not in the day-to-day. And so just thinking about those things helps me balance my thinking.
Hello, and welcome to the Founder Shares podcast, brought to you by Hutchison, a law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina that helps founders and entrepreneurs in technology and life science companies start up, operate, get funded, and exit. So whether you're already an entrepreneur or want to be one someday, or are just fascinated by the stories of how a business goes from idea to success, or not such a success, this podcast is for you. Our guest today is Tina Tang, co-founder and CEO of Bristles, a startup that's developed a mobile app for helping design home DIY projects. Tina has made a lot of noise recently in the Triangle startup community, having secured funding from well-known local investors like NC Idea, the Triangle Tweener Fund, and Primordial. But Tina's path to entrepreneurship was not originally front of mind.
I always kind of envisioned my career as a ladder. And so I'd spent, all my life climbing this ladder, starting as an analyst, then consultant, and then on my way up to management.
Okay.
But as I was looking my way up that ladder in IT consulting to the top, I felt like that's not where I wanted my career to end up. And so as I was imagining different career paths, just thinking through what options I had, I did see the startup ladder. And so I just had to think about what it would take for me to remove myself from this ladder I was climbing and then go to that startup ladder. And I think that was the first time I really thought about becoming an entrepreneur.
Okay. So this hadn't been a vision from when you were a little kid or anything like that?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So how do you, that's such a huge leap, because especially as you have that visualization of the one ladder you're climbing up and now there's another ladder I can get to. Mm-hmm. How did you convince yourself, I really want to take that step and move off this one ladder?
So it was a very difficult decision.
Uh-huh.
So a little bit more about kind of my growing up. Mm-hmm. I was the first person in my family to even go to high school.
Okay.
And so getting to that point of finishing high school, valedictorian, I felt like, okay, I think I sort of made it. And then I got this job in IT consulting. And that was kind of my next level of, okay, I made it. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of thinking when I was making it in IT consulting to realize that's really not my dream. Once I started thinking that, then I could not stop seeing the other ladder. And so even though in my mind I had to kind of start from the bottom, if you will, it was worth that risk, because otherwise I'd be working my way up to the top and I knew I would regret not trying the other option.
So what, I guess as your childhood self, when you were a little kid, what did you want to do? What did you want to be when you were a little kid?
A lot of things.
Okay.
So I was really into art as a kid. I really enjoyed drawing and painting, and part of that started from when I was learning to speak English. My dad's from Vietnam. My mom is from a farming village in China. Okay. And they both spoke Cantonese at home. No English. So when I started public school and kindergarten, I didn't speak a word of English. And it was very scary learning the language and just saying anything out loud. Right. And so I preferred drawing to communicate and to share my ideas. That's kind of where it started. But then as I was in elementary school, high school, I found out I was pretty good at math. And so I saw the engineering path. I enjoyed solving complex problems. Mm-hmm. And so I pursued that as a career.
And I don't know how to ask that, but is that also kind of, we talk about making it and feeling that responsibility of did math seem like an easier path to making it in some respects than art did? Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about, I guess it looks like in your background, you previously worked IT consulting, and then you left that to do a master's program, is that right? Mm-hmm. In systems engineering. Mm-hmm. So you've always kind of been in this tech field. What did you learn from that, or what kind of experiences from that has shaped what you're doing now?
Yeah. So back to the ladders metaphor.
Yeah.
When I was making that big decision to go from IT consulting to then doing a startup, at the time, it felt like I was starting all the way at the bottom of the ladder, and I had to learn everything all over again. But through my experience actually working, like building a startup, I realized that your life experience, it all comes into play as you're on that second ladder. And so in reality, it's like I have this backpack full of tools that I gained from the first ladder that I can use to climb up the second one. So when you're talking about what I learned from tech, from working in IT consulting, the things I took away were really the soft skills. The technical problem-solving skills were great, but what I really enjoyed from IT consulting was talking to my clients, getting to know their problems, understanding what their pain points were, and then solving it through building technology, and then watching their faces light up when their pain points have been resolved. And that was the part that I really enjoyed, and I still get to do that today.
Well, I was going to say, as soon as you described that, I was like, wow, that sounds like a big part of being a startup founder.
And I think my experience there and learning, like kind of getting addicted to that process has helped me in the startup journey for sure.
So now when you left IT consulting and went for the master's program, was it in your mind that I'm doing this for the purpose of then starting a company?
Yeah, so I felt like I needed to upskill in terms of getting into cutting edge tech.
Okay.
So that was why I went into machine learning. So while I was in IT consulting, my partner in business and in life, Anthony, he was pursuing his PhD in biomedical engineering focused on computational neuroscience. And so I saw him applying machine learning to solve problems, and we would talk about how this was the future. And we wanted to be part of building that future.
Okay. And so how do you get from kind of there to where you're at now with Bristles? How did Bristles get started?
Yeah. So as soon as I left consulting, it's a very fast-paced work environment, and I started working at where I started grad school. I had so much more time than I had ever had to think. And I think that was very special. And so with that time, I would explore what I could do with these new skills that I was learning. Training machine learning models. I was very fascinated by computer vision. And then the artistic side of me came out again. So I was using machine learning to test all of these ideas. And I learned you could use these models to transform images in really amazing ways. And if these tools were given to the everyday consumer, that they could really amp up creativity and what the everyday person could create with just their smartphone.
So, I mean, it sounds like then you have this idea, and again, you're just melding together these different aspects of your background. So how does that go from, I guess, that idea that you can put it in the hands of the consumer to like making it into a business?
Yeah. So initially we were just very inspired. So Anthony and I are engineers, but we also love art. And so it started with just being inspired by this idea that technology could help unleash new waves of creativity. So I'll break to tell a story about the Impressionists. Impressionist artists like Monet, for example, they were able to really get into their craft based on this invention at the time of transportable paint in tubes. So prior to paint being transportable, artists had to mix their own paints in their studios, and they were kind of trapped in their, not trapped, but they were stuck in their studios painting.
Right.
And once these tubes of paint were invented, they were then able to take their art out into the open air and paint live. And this enabled them to capture these fleeting moments. If you look at Impressionist paintings, you'll see they emphasize how the light catches, they emphasize movement. And when you're back in your studio, you're not in front of these details because they're so fleeting. And so you can't capture them. And so we were inspired by this idea that you could build technology that helps people do things they just couldn't have done before. And we wanted to do that with AI, building creative tools. So then the next question was, okay, this is a very kind of vague idea. How do we focus it a little bit? We started thinking about where people struggle with creativity. We kind of landed on home because we were stuck at home at the time, quarantining, and we had all of these projects that we wanted to plan. We wanted to get creative, but it was also very daunting to make changes in your home. This is, as adults, when we make changes in our home, they can't be so wacky that like your friends come over and they're like, what is going on in here? And so it's one of those things where you want to get your ideas kind of on paper. And then both you and your partner need to agree. You also kind of want to show your friends and see, like, you want to get buy-in before making those final decisions.
Right.
And so this was the creative problem we landed on solving. And as we shared that idea with people, they got really excited in a way that was very different from when I shared the idea about this artistic tool. It was too vague when I was talking about that idea, I think. But when I talked about this new idea where you have your phone and you're able to take all the photos that you saved for your home improvement project ideas and create mock-ups with them. So you can think of every photo that you saved as an idea, and there's something specific that intrigued you about that photo. It could be something abstract like a paint color. It could be a particular product in the photo. And what we wanted to do was to help you extract that thing that intrigued you and help you put it all together to create your vision.
Okay.
And that resonated with people a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think it's still taking that same idea of technology enhancing a space or the art or thinking of the spaces that we live in as a form of art, but also everybody has a house. Everybody has decorations that they have to do. So it makes so much sense that this resonates with people because there's just a need that we all have as we start to decorate those spaces. So where do you go from there? You got this idea. People seem interested in it. What's that next step?
Yeah, so it's been exciting. We launched our app in app stores in mid-March. We're just growing our user base right now, and people are getting really excited. We actually just discovered one of our customers wrote an entire blog post about our AI tools and how it's a game changer. So it's been really enjoyable discovering all of these little bits of making customers happy, and that's what we're focused on. It's making our customers happy and growing the business, growing our user base.
Well, and I also want to take a step back because you kind of talked about this a couple times about the way that AI is influencing what you're doing and how machine learning is in your background and is affecting your product here. It seems now that everywhere you look and read about today, everybody's talking about AI and how it's changing technologies. You've been in the space long before it was kind of on the media's bandwidth. So how do you think about this time and kind of the advances that have been made? And how does that impact your business right now, having this be in the forefront of people's imagination?
I think it's super exciting. So when we first started, and I would talk about this idea with investors, and they would say, why are you working with images? Why don't you do AR? It was kind of, at the time, AR seemed like the higher tech version of what we're doing. And I would say, no, generative AI is the more advanced technology. And now that's not a question anymore. Now that's very obvious. So just seeing that shift has been great. And it's easier to get people on board.
And I was going to say, does it change, I guess, the conversations you're having with investors or potential partners that you're working with? Is it easier to have that explain what you're doing? Do you find people are better educated about it or are they just excited about it?
A little bit of both. More so excited about it, but definitely they recognize the power of it now. Whereas before, I really had to explain it, and only certain people got it.
So when you talk about it being a part of your product, can you explain for somebody who's not technical, how does AI impact your tool?
Yeah. So it enables us to turn simple images, 2D images that people take every day on their phones, into these dynamic design objects. So AI is kind of weaved in all sorts of ways. We focus on solving this problem of building mock-ups of your home improvement ideas, and that involves a couple different steps. One is you start by removing anything that you don't want, and so the piece of AI that solves that is called in-painting. It's what powers our AI eraser. The next piece of it is, okay, you remove things you don't want. Now, what do you want to transform? Often people can do really creative things with paint if they have a creative tool to help them plan out different ways to apply it.
Okay.
So then that's another way that we use image translation is visualizing paint, visualizing different materials on your space. And then the last piece is adding new things. And so we let you cut things out of images, and that's a background removal algorithm. So those are kind of the different ways we bake in AI. And then we just added an AI idea generator also, which is kind of powering dreaming up ideas. So we want to help people dream up ideas, design ideas, and then eventually also do the doing part of it.
Now, have you ever had kind of a customer or an end user use your tool in a way that surprised you, or like built something that just still sticks with you today?
Well, I'm amazed by our customers. They are artists.
Yeah.
So most of our customers today are furniture refinishers. So they'll take a piece of furniture from the thrift store and they'll completely sand it down, repaint it. And when I say repaint, I don't mean just choosing a paint color and it's just a solid color. Right. They really get creative with design, and it's really beautiful, the art that they create with furniture. Mm-hmm. I'm really impressed. And then they add hardware on top. And the way they talk about hardware, it's like people talking about how jewelry enhances an outfit. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
Well, that's really cool, because I always think it's amazing, as somebody who develops technology, you have an idea of how it's going to be used, or you have an idea of its possibilities, but then you put it out in the world. Yeah. And there are so many creative and interesting people out there who are thinking about it in potentially different ways. So I'm always interested to hear what have people done with it that surprised you? So.
I guess overall furniture as a category surprised me in the beginning. I did not expect that. Okay. We were thinking home, more like built-in shelves and that sort of thing in the beginning. But the biggest use case by far right now is furniture refinishing.
Interesting. So now I think in 2021, you decided to apply for an NC IDEO grant? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where was the company at kind of when you started that process?
We were nothing at the time. We were in a very vague idea at the time when I applied for NC IDEO. So we hadn't even pivoted to home yet at that point. And I applied because I guess we needed just an ounce of validation. Right. And it really did help with that. And Amy Bastian and John Austin from NC IDEO have been great mentors.
That's great. So, kind of for our listeners, what was that process like? How did you start the process? Was there an interview how did that go?
So we applied for the micro grant, which is their 10K grant. I'm remembering there was an application, and I believe there was one presentation piece, and then they make decisions. Okay. So it's much shorter than the seed process.
And what did it feel like when you won? What was that when you got that notice? Yeah,
it was that validation that we were looking for.
Okay, so you knew you were kind of on the right track at least. So from that point, what's the next step then? You've got a little bit of validation. What was the first thing you did with that grant?
So it helped us start proving out our idea. It supported us going to this DIY conference, for example, where we met a lot of our early beta users. It helped us just start testing, getting customer feedback and things like that.
So how would you describe the business model for the product? As all startups are in the business to make money eventually. So what's the model for the product?
Yeah, so we charge for our design tool. So we're building this premium design product, and our customers pay to use it. Okay. It's a subscription service. So we have monthly and annual subscriptions.
And was that based off of feedback you'd gotten from your customers, from your investors? How did you come to make that decision?
We were thinking about monetization, and there were a couple of different avenues. One would be the simplest one. It would be charging directly for the product. Mm-hmm. And then the other would be connecting folks to the products they'll need to actually execute on their projects, which is something we're still exploring. Okay. But we heard from interviews from our customers that they would pay for this, that this tool is something they need. Mm-hmm. And so we started with that.
That's great. So especially with the furniture redesign, do these people already have they already bought the piece of furniture in their home and trying to redesign it? Or are you seeing people kind of going out into the marketplace and using the tool to decide what they want to buy?
It's more so they have the piece already, or a client has reached out to them with a picture of their piece and they're asking, what could you do with this piece? Okay. And then they have this design conversation using our tool.
Interesting. So what have been some of the early challenges that you've had in either developing the product or just growing the business to this point?
There are many. I think that just comes with building a startup, there are always going to be many, many challenges. I think the one that has been the toughest is I'm very goal-driven.
Okay.
When my goal is to make customers happy, then I focus on product. And then there are other secondary goals when you're building a startup. One sometimes is trying to raise funding. Mm-hmm. And when that's your goal, it's easy to hear feedback from investors and immediately jumping to making a bunch of changes based on that feedback. And so one challenge has been of making myself take a step back and really analyze the feedback and decide on what is actually the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. I think overcoming that has been the biggest challenge, but also it's been really important to start thinking that way because I think about these meetings with investors and they hear 10 to 20 minutes of my spiel,
right?
But they're not in the day-to-day.
Yep.
And so just thinking about those things helps me balance my thinking.
And what have you found to be useful in helping you to kind of judge what advice is good to take versus what advice you can respectfully decline to take?
I think about what they know and what I know. Mm-hmm. Depending on who the investor is, they have specific sets of experience that I might not have. And so that's how I try to think about it. Where have they spent 10 years of time? What have they been doing? Mm-hmm. What expertise do they have that is actually better than my expertise? Whereas my experience is the day-to-day running the startup. So what do I know that they might not know when they're giving me the feedback? And that's kind of how I think about it.
That's interesting. Well, it seems like you've been garnering a lot of attention from kind of significant names in the area as far as investment. I understand you were one of the first 4 companies that were funded by Scott Wingo's Tweener Fund, and more recently were the first investment from Joe Colopy's Primordial Fund. Is that right?
The second.
Second. Oh, dang it. Okay, you got that wrong. So the second investment.
The second. So the Triangle Tweener Fund invested in January of 2022, so shortly after we won the NC Idea microgrant. And Scott Wingo has been just a constant in our startup journey. It's been really great having his expertise and just having his support. Mm-hmm. I think having people in your corner is really important, and that has been great for us. And his advice is really helpful too.
So how did these investments come about? I mean, were you out doing a lot of networking? Did they hear about you from somewhere else? How did that happen?
Yeah. So with the Triangle Tweener Fund, I met Scott. So GrepBeat had done a profile on us after we won the NC Idea microgrant. And I think Scott read that, reached out to me, and we met up. And so that's how he learned about Bristles, what we're doing. He saw an early demo of our product. So that's how that first investment came to be.
Okay.
And then with Primordial, I met Jen at CED. We were presenting. We were one of the presenting companies. We had a conversation, and Primordial moves very quickly. And so that's how that happened.
That's excellent. So what did these investments kind of allow you to do that you weren't able to do before? And how do you plan to use this money?
Well, one thing is Anthony and I had not been paying ourselves through this whole time. It's mostly been self-funded.
Okay.
And so one thing that is, life-changing for a founder is just being able to support yourself a little bit, just a little bit, helps. That's been a big thing. And then just being able to extend our runway with having users, making product updates, operations, spending increases a little bit. So it supports us just continuing on and getting to nailing product market fit.
So with these investments, are you done fundraising for now, or are you still seeking out investment?
We're always looking for introductions to folks that would be interested in joining us on this journey. If you're an angel investor and you're interested, I would love to talk to you.
Now, we always talk about that, when you're seeking investment, a good investment comes with more than just a check. So you need some network or some experience. Is there a particular experience that these investors that would be helpful to the company?
Yeah, I think anyone who's operated in the home space would love to talk to them. Anyone who's operated in kind of design software would love to talk to them too.
So is it still just you and Anthony on the team right now, or have you started to grow that out?
We're the only full-time members. As we close additional funding, we'll be able to add new team members. With this latest funding, we were able to add a few interns to the team this summer, and that's been really exciting, just having having their energy on the team. We have 3 interns. They are super creative, and each of them are super unique. And so they just add a lot of excitement to the day-to-day.
Well, that's awesome to be able to have, again, that energy come in. But I'm sure it adds new challenges for you as well. Kind of, how do you manage just a growing startup and with more people involved?
I found good people. They are very pleasant to work with. There have been no issues so far.
That's great. So how did you go about finding your interns?
So Amy Linane from Duke sent an email out to the Duke students. And Kyle Williams from Duke also reached out to, I think, the Duke entrepreneurial-minded students. And we got this huge influx of applications. There was a lot of interest. And so even though it was late in the summer, I thought it would be a little bit challenging to find folks to want to join, but people were really excited.
That's great. And so what would you say, kind of, if you had, I wouldn't say unlimited funds, but like what would be your first big hire if you wanted to bring more people on?
Yeah, so we have a really talented AI engineer that wants to join full time, including moving to the Triangle. So he would be my first hire.
That's great. So you talk about some of the interactions with your customers. What is some of the feedback you've been getting from your customers? What is it that they want this tool to do, or that they like about the tool so far?
They love being able to take their images and put them together to visualize their ideas. So I think a lot of people have been wanting to do this. Mm-hmm. And one tool you could use is something like Photoshop. Right. But Photoshop is really hard to use. And kind of like that, back to that example of the artist being stuck in their studio, mm-hmm. for you to really use Photoshop, you have to be at your desktop computer. So you're like stuck.
Because that Photoshop, that'll suck your memory of your computer. It's a huge drag.
And you have to be at your computer, right? So you can't be out in the world with your phone. So I think one thing they appreciate is they don't need to be at their computer. They just pull out their phone and they can visualize their idea in a really complex way. Mm-hmm. They have the tools to turn all their images into little building blocks, put them together in a way that looks Photoshop but feels easy.
And so kind of as you think about iterations or next step for the product, what do you have in mind? What do you hope to see it do that you can share with us?
Yeah, so one thing, I love listening to customer feedback, and a lot of our inspiration for product updates come from that. It's more complicated than directly implementing the feedback, but it's more so if we hear something a lot, then that really gets our attention. And so one thing we're hearing a lot about is to stage objects. So that's what we're working on now. AI
when you
staging.
say stage objects, what do you mean by that?
So with furniture, for example, a lot of our customers are selling their pieces for a profit. So they flip it and then sell the updated piece of furniture. A lot of them work in their garages. And so they have either a corner of their house or a corner of their garage that's for staging. Okay. But they want to do it digitally instead. And so we're going to build that next.
So when you say staging, like take that and just kind of visualize it in a different space, or?
Exactly. Think about product images, mm-hmm. and when you're browsing on, say, Wayfair or something, they have all of these professionally shot pieces of furniture. Mm-hmm. And so what they want is a way to get that type of image.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what's something about your startup journey so far that has surprised you, that hasn't been what you expected it to be?
I feel like I'm surprised every day by something. Yeah. But I guess how rewarding every step is, that has been a pleasant surprise. I get very excited every time a customer has something nice to say, mm-hmm. about our product, or we get a sale. I didn't expect like those daily bits of excitement, I guess. And those are great to keep me going.
So is that what you mean when you say it's rewarding, or are there other aspects of it that you find super rewarding that makes you glad that you're doing this instead of the corporate ladder you talked about?
Yeah, I think with building a startup, everything that happens has been based on, decisions that I make, decisions Anthony makes. And so we can look back on all of our progress and that is all of our work. And so that is very personally rewarding.
Now, is there something that you wish you knew kind of at the outset of this journey that you know now that you've kind of learned through either mistakes or kind of it was a little bit harder than you expected? What do you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
So I talked about the backpack of tools that I had from my consulting experience. I think I wish I would have just had more confidence in the fact that I have built skills to help me succeed on this new ladder.
Yeah.
It took me a while to kind of figure that out, that I had advantages, I guess.
I was going to say, I mean, maybe talk about that a little bit. Is it challenging to kind of move into this role and believe that you can do it and believe that you have the skills to kind of build a company and not feel like an imposter, I guess, to borrow the term?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I still feel that.
Okay.
But more and more with, the support I have around me, it keeps pushing me forward. I still have to remind myself every day that, I can do this. But I think also every day I'm proving more and more that I can.
And you talk about the support. How have you kind of found people to support and encourage you in this journey? I mean, is it people you've just met or have you been intentional about it?
I think the startup community here is just naturally very supportive. I haven't gone after support. Everyone here is just always trying to lift each other up, I think. And so that's been nice.
That's great. I mean, it's a good thing to hear for the community, but it's also, good for you kind of within your own business.
For sure.
Now, I was thinking about, you talked about looking up at the corporate ladder, feeling that you'd made it or know what the next step is to make it. What do you think making it looks like for you and for Bristles? What's your vision there?
For now, I'm focused on making customers really happy, and those are little versions of making it. But, growing our user base, growing the business, introducing additional revenue streams into the future, growing the team. These are all steps on the ladder that I'm seeing. And then eventually to an exit that could be acquisition or something else. We'll see.
So what do you see as for like the immediate next step for the company? What is your hope for that, like within the next year?
Yeah, I think so. It's still really early days. We are just a few months launched in the App Store. So really figuring out our marketing and spreading the word and growing our subscriber base.
Now, it's interesting. You talk about the different roles that a CEO has to play or as a founder that you have to play. How do you think about ways to reach your customers? How are you going about doing your marketing now? How do you build your user base at this point?
Yeah, so we have spread the word on Instagram. Our product is very visual, so that has been effective for us, just showing how the product works, and people get excited just seeing it, which has been nice for us. And we've grown kind of a community on Instagram. We have our customers cheering us on, and so that's how we've been doing it so far. That's
great. I mean, word of mouth is probably the best way to get people excited about it. So. Well, we are the Founders Shares podcast, and so I like to ask all of our guests, if you had one piece of advice that you wanted to share with somebody who was thinking about starting a company, what would your advice be?
I think just start the journey and believe you can do it.
It sounds so easy in some respects, just start. But like, what would you say? What kept you from starting, or what was holding you back or telling you not to start?
I think it was this fear that I have put this time into my career thus far in IT consulting, got to manager or associate manager, which is what I wanted at the time. And would I regret hopping off that ladder in the end? I mean, I don't have any regrets.
I was going to ask you, so any regrets? At any point you were like, nope, I wish I had stayed doing IT consulting. Yeah.
As soon as I made the decision, as soon as I made the leap and started grad school, and just felt like the world opened up. Even just from then, I had no regrets.
Yeah. So, I mean,
it's just, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just an encouragement to everybody who's listening. So how would you encourage people to make that step or to really kind of believe that they can do it?
Yeah. I think having some plan helps. So for me, it was important to build up some savings, knowing that it could help me through the beginning when things are very uncertain.
Yeah.
So that helped me. And then making a plan for how you will decide on the business. So for me, that was going to grad school. Grad school was kind of the intermediate step between quitting my IT consulting job and fully leaping into the startup world.
And was that to help come up with ideas of ways to form the business, or was that, I don't want to say a fallback mechanism, but like, if the startup didn't pan out, you still had your master's degree and could go do that. What was your thinking around that?
Well, I was very interested in solving problems with machine learning, but I felt like I didn't have all of the skills I needed yet to really think through what I could do.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was important to go get those skills. Yeah, but for someone else, it could be something else. But I guess you don't have to fully jump in.
Right.
There's probably some immediate step that you can take.
I think that's also helpful. It's not an either or all or nothing type of thing, but you can just take that first step and continue that process down. Mm-hmm. Well, that's helpful. So tell our listeners how they can find out more about the app, how they can learn more about your company, or just connect with you directly.
Yeah. So our app is in the app stores. We're in the Apple App Store and Google Play. And you can also find out more about us on our website at bristles.ai. And I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect.
Awesome. That's great. I appreciate it so much, Tina. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for being on the show, and look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thanks, Trevor. This was great.
That was Tina Tang, co-founder and CEO of Bristles, which again, you can find out more about at bristles.ai. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founder Shares podcast. If you're a founder or business owner and need legal advice, be sure to check out our team at hutchlaw.com. That's hutchlaw.com. We have the capacity to help you out with just about any legal need your company may be facing. We're passionate about the innovation economy and ready to help you on your entrepreneurial journey. The show was edited and produced by Earfluence. I'm Trevor Schmidt, and thanks for listening to the Founder Shares podcast.